Today I'm going to break down this beautiful trellis and shade that Carol built for her raised garden beds. We'll talk about the materials, tools, assembly, and everything that you need to know to make it yourself. At the very end, I'll add everything up and share a total cost, so stick around for that. Let's get into it. At first glance, the structure might look kind of complex, but it's actually really simple. The cool thing about this design that she came up with is that it's totally customizable and modular based on different garden beds. You can see that Carol has three raised garden beds that she built these for. But I'll show you how to adapt the design to fit more or fewer raised beds, as well as a hack to make it freestanding if you don't have any raised garden beds at all. With that said, let's talk about the two main materials that you need for the framework. Carol used 3/4 inch EMT conduit and various maker pipe fittings to connect the framework together. You can find 3/4 inch EMT conduit in the electrical aisle of hardware and home improvement stores. Now, the amount that you need depends on the number of garden beds that you have and the dimensions of them. Everyone that's watching is going to have different garden bed sizes, so I'm not going to share any exact dimensions, but I will share a couple of helpful tips for figuring out the cuts that you need to make. Now, to cut the conduit, you're going to need a marker, a tape measure, and a pipe and tube cutter. Before I share those cutting tips, let's look at the connectors that she used in the frame. MakerPipe has a lot of different connector types to choose from, but she only utilized two specific clamps, one of which is the MakerPipe T connector. This consists of two pieces that connect together with a single nut and bolt, and it holds two pipes inside of it. The other connector that she used was the MakerPipe 90-degree connector. This joins three pipes together with two nuts and bolts. I'll share the quantities of each connector as we put the frame together. Now, to put the frame together and assemble the connectors, you're only going to need a 5 millimeter hex wrench. Usually, I like to cut all my conduit before building, but you can also do it as you go through the build as well. Regardless, here's how I would recommend finding the measurements for the pipes in your build. First is going to be the height, and this is totally up to you, but I would recommend staying under 8 feet tall. You're going to need a total of 4 verticals per garden bed, as you can see here. Now, this means that we're going to need 12 total verticals if we have 3 beds like Carol does. I'm going to do a miniature scale build so it's easier for you to visualize how everything is going to be assembled. We'll go ahead and cut out the verticals that we need for the structure. The next dimension that we need to know is this front to back pipe here. Just like with the verticals, once we figure out the measurement once, we can cut a bunch of pipes that are all the same length because all of these pipes are going to be exactly the same measurement as long as the garden beds are all the same size. Otherwise, you'll just need to find the measurements for each bed that you have. For 3 beds that are all the same size like Carol, we're going to need 8 pieces of conduit that are all the same length. I'm going to go ahead and cut my coffee stirrers, but of course you can find the measurement and then cut your conduit. One pro tip I have for finding measurements like this is to lay down a piece of conduit on the end of each bed and loosely put a connector on both pieces of conduit. Then all you have to do is measure between the connectors and figure out what that measurement needs to be. Now we just have two measurements left to find. Let's do the width of each garden bed structure, which is actually going to be these two pipes here. You can use the same trick that we just did to find these measurements as well. If you're like Carol and have 3 garden beds, then you'll need 6 total pieces of pipe that are cut to this measurement. Lastly are these braces between each bed. I recommend finding these after you have the structure built and in place. It'll be much easier to find the length then, and then you can add the braces at that point. With our cuts pretty much done, we can finally start to build. As I said earlier, it's actually a fairly simple structure. For the main part of the frame, we need 4 of the 90-degree connectors. We're going to start by adding these connectors to the vertical pipes. I recommend doing this on the ground before securing everything to your garden beds. You'll want to measure about 12 inches from the top of the verticals and loosely add a 90-degree connector at that measurement. After that is done, you should have 4 verticals with 90-degree connectors at the top, as you can see here. Now we're going to add the pipe that goes from side to side, which is what we marked as yellow earlier on. We're just going to add these between the two 90s, and we're going to do that twice. Then you should have something that looks like this, and now all we have to do is add the front to back pipes that we marked as blue earlier, and we're just going to connect these two halves together. Now at this point, you can tighten all the 90-degree connectors, and you should have a simple structure that looks like this. Basically, you're just going to repeat that same process for every garden bed that you have, whether it's 1, 2, or 8, or however many. Now, since Carol has 3 beds, I've gone ahead and made 2 more exactly the same. Now's a good time to put the frames in place around your garden bed before we make the last few connections and add all the other fun stuff like the sunshade and tomato hooks. And once the garden beds are in place, we can connect them together with the braces that I mentioned earlier and marked in purple. You're simply going to add a T connector about 3 feet down the vertical pipes. Once you have them in place, you can measure between them to find the length. Then we're just going to connect the structures together in the same way with T connectors and conduit between them. The last two pipes that we have to attach are these here on the sides, and these actually function as curtain rods for the sunshade. This is super smart. I love this. Instead of trying to find a sunshade that fit her three beds exactly, Carol bought one that was 20 feet long, and she just let the excess hang over the ends. Now, she used these front to back pipes to pull the sunshade tight. I'm pretty sure this is the exact sunshade that she used, but I could be wrong. I'll link it down below, but most likely you'll want to do your own research to figure out which percentage sunshade that you need to get based on the area that you live in and the specific plants that you're growing. Before we add the sunshade, let's secure the framework to the garden beds and get the tomato hooks up. To secure the frame, Carol used one-hole straps, which are these things here. They basically just snap around the conduit, and then you can just add a screw directly into your garden bed with a power drill or screwdriver. She used two straps per vertical, which will do a really good job of keeping the whole frame in place. Also, as I said earlier, you can use this same design as a freestanding trellis and shade if you'd like. You'll still want to secure the whole structure, and you can do that with these metal stakes. All you have to do is simply hammer one into the ground and slide the vertical over top of it. This adds a lot of stability and rigidity to freestanding structures. Next is the trellis netting, and of course you can customize this based on your specific plants and needs, but Carol used these tomato hooks that have rollers and twine on them. They are supported with some flexible metal wire that runs from the front of the frame to the back. She just wrapped the wire around the pipes a few times to secure it in place, which looks like it works pretty well. Lastly, we can add the sunshade. Make sure the sunshade that you get has grommets so you can easily add the shower curtain hooks and slide them over the conduit. You can also add grommets if you need be using a kit that I'll link down below. Now you can adjust these pipes on the side to pull the sunshade tight. Once you do that, you'll have your finished trellis and shade. Now, I don't know the exact cost of everything, but I did an estimate based on the details that Carol shared, and I think in total for everything, she spent around $425. Of course, there are a lot of variables like the garden bed dimensions that could make it more expensive or cheaper overall. I hope you found this breakdown helpful and have the confidence to build it yourself. If you enjoyed this type of video and want to see more like it, please let us know down in the comments. Thanks everybody for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.